Okay, hi everyone. We're on day 2 of our immunostaining protocol. Remember, last session we left our sections in the primary antibody solution. Marlene stopped that reaction. She did a whole bunch of rinses to stop that binding process. And so here we're starting with day 2 of our protocol right here, which says that we must do 4 rinses, but like I said, Marlene's already done the rinses, and so the sections are now sitting in rinse number 3 right here. These are the sections that are ready. You can see them here, they're in here. They're sitting in rinse number 3, and then there's rinse number 4. So let's go ahead and move it over to rinse number 4. Typically, these rinses would be 5 minutes each. And then right after those rinses, we have something called the avidin biotin peroxidase reagent step. And we're doing this because we're using a biotinylated mouse antibody. And again, I will explain this to you guys in a lot more detail in lecture. And so after the rinse, we would get them into step number 7, which is your ABC solution. We've written ABC right there. And preparing all of these solutions, actually, you just follow a formula, and depending on how much you need, depending on the concentration, you just make the solutions. Here, Marlene has made all the solutions for us.
For this particular step, we use a kit. They sell kits, and they're called ABC kits, and they usually just have 2 little bottles, and usually, like here, I wrote down for 5 mils of solution, I would just add 2 drops of reagent A and 2 drops of reagent B. So most kits, they sell a lot of kits like this, and it makes this step a lot easier.
Okay, so again, just like after every major step, we've followed it through with rinses. This is not an exception to that. So now we can move to step number 8, where we say we have 4 rinses. However, again, in the interest of time, we're only going to be doing 3, and there's your rinse number 1, rinse number 2, rinse number 3. Now your rinses are just KPBS solutions, which again we'll talk about more during lecture. So if you want to, Marlene, move the sections into the rinses, these would typically be 5 minutes each. You want to make sure all your sections are being exposed to the solution evenly. Okay.
Yep. I'll go ahead and
Yep, so let's move it on to the next rinse. And then we have one final rinse before we move on to step 9, which is the visualization reaction via DAB. And this must be conducted under the hood. Now here you will see that your sections, we can move it over to the rinse number 3. You can see your sections are still are clear, right? Right here. Let's move them to the black background. You can see those are your sections that have been incubating in a series of solutions. Now we need to visualize that. We have all the binding that we need of the primary, the ABC. And so now we're gonna visualize it with the DAB. DAB, you use your DAB solutions you make right before you use them. You do them under the hood. And here we are, for time, we are using a DAB kit. And so Marlene's gonna be preparing the DAB just fresh. we already have a set amount of kPbS in that well. So we know how many drops to add.
The nickel will help visualize the DAB and it'll make it dark.
Okay.
So then after that, I'm gonna mix it a little bit.
Yep, make sure that it's consistent.
And then I'll go ahead and add my sections in there.
So now what you should see is you should be able to see the reaction happening, and as you see, the sections are now starting to turn a lot darker. So this is the step where you have to watch your sections. You have to make sure they don't get too dark, and you have to make sure they're not too light. We usually say 10 minutes, but this one we really play by ear. And you see some of those sections, you see the cortical areas just really, really getting dark. Some of the sections are already starting to turn dark. Unfortunately, this is one of the steps we cannot rush because we have to make sure that the reaction happens appropriately. The sections all react with the DAB.
They are getting darker.
And you can see sections already changing color. Now after this, we would do a whole bunch of rinses. Again, you see step number 10 is to rinse the tissue 5 times, 3 minutes each. And then after that, after the rinses is when you would then mount your sections, give them some time to dry, and then cover slip them. Whereas with the Nissl staining, we had already mounted the tissue, we had let the sections dry, we ran them through all of our alcohol baths and our staining bath, and then we quickly cover slip them. Now with the Nissl, we used DPX to cover slip. Here it says 4% glycerol, but we're also going to use DPX. Okay, so now we're going to start the rinses. You see that the sections have already turned dark. I think we could, under normal circumstances, let that reaction run a little longer. But I think this is going to be sufficient enough to get the data that we need. So now let's just go ahead and start the rinses.
They do look pretty a little dark.
Yeah. So here we go. Here we have 5 of the rinses set up. And we could just move these just right along.
Just making sure any excess DAB is removed.
Yes, and DAB, you can't dispose of it in the sink. You actually have to deactivate it. So we usually use a DAB deactivating solution to deactivate DAB before getting rid of it as waste. And just as a general rule, anytime you're working in a wet lab, you should actually know all the chemicals that you're working with and all the hazards associated with each one of those chemicals, so that you wear the appropriate PPE and that you handle them properly, whether they need to be handled under a chemical fume hood or could be handled outside of the hood. They have material safety data sheets for that. They're called MSDS sheets. So I recommend, if you're working in a wet lab, have the MSDS sheets for every single chemical that you work with, so you know how to protect yourself and you know how to appropriately use them. So those are your sections. Marlene now is just going to mount one or two of them onto the...
I'll mount it over here.
Now you guys would be doing this yourselves. You would be mounting your stain sections in order from rostral to caudal.
See what I'm doing.
Why don't you take it out of the hood?
Okay. Ah, there we go. Let me try
Yep,
again.
no problem.
It takes a little effort.
Especially initially, remember these are subbed slides, so you can't move the section around on them too easily. They stick, and so it takes a little bit of maneuvering to get it done.
There we go.
And you can add some KPBS to help you do that. And now if we can,
There's like,
if you guys can get on. So there's your mounted section right there. Marlene's just gonna mount one more. We're gonna try and physically dry it. Typically you would leave it out for 10 minutes, let it air dry before cover slipping so that your sections aren't sliding around while you're cover slipping. Today we'll be doing some things differently.
oh, I got more than one section on here. What's there?
Okay,
There we go.
there you go. Those are our two sections that we mounted. We are going to use Kim wipes and brushes to
Let me grab it.
dry, to get all the KPBS off, because right now we don't have the time to let it air dry.
So you can see the first one that I mounted's already dry. But this one we just needs a little extra time.
There you go.
I'll just a corner of my Kim wipe.
Okay.
And
Yep. And then remember DPX from our crystal violet staining or Nissel staining needs to be done under the hood.
KPBS usually dries pretty quickly, so you can see now it's pretty dry.
Now we can take these crystal violet
Slides.
sections away. Okay.
Yeah.
PX dry, like Marlene said, clean it up with a razor blade, clean it up with some alcohol, and then image that under the scope. And I will show you what these sections actually look like once they're imaged under the microscope. Okay, and that concludes our day 2 of our immunostaining protocol. Thank you, Marlene.